Hi, I'm Robbie Bobby. Did you know that ACA relies on two sets of steps? Well, it most certainly does. This video is part 2 in a series which compares the standard ACA steps with their unofficial counterpart, the Tony A steps, which are aimed at healing the inner child, primarily through self-love. However, due to legal issues, ACA is unable to print the Tony A steps in any of its literature, including the Steps Workbook. And while their spirit and essence are found in the readings, exercises, and questions, the fact they're never directly mentioned gives the false impression that the workbook is founded on the standard steps alone. This is not only misleading, it's downright confusing, especially when the steps are going in very different directions. The aim of this video and series is to help the listener better understand these two complementary sets of steps, and thereby better understand the workbook and the ACA recovery program in general. We'll now continue with Step 2, Standard Version. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Tony A version. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could bring us clarity. These two versions seem quite similar, but there is a we difference. The Tony A version starts with we, while the standard version does not. What gives? Well, they're both saying the same thing, really, because the we is implied in the standard version. You see, the introduction to the 12 steps in AA's Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, "Here are the steps we took." Again, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. It then goes on to list the 12 steps, beginning only step 1 with the word we. However, it is implied in the rest. Therefore, we came to believe in the Tony A version is simply adding the we which is implied in the standard version. They mean the same thing. And the we originally referred to the first 100 people who took these steps. Today, it refers to millions who have taken them and found recovery. It also refers to the we nature of the program, which means you don't work it on your own. Instead, you work it with a sponsor, with fellow travelers, with the entire fellowship, and with a higher power. In other words, there is an abundance of support. All right, with that out of the way, we can look at the main difference between these two versions of Step 2. Restore us to sanity versus bring us clarity. Restore us to sanity is the original and official version of Step 2. It's used in AA, Al-Anon, and every other 12-step program, including ACA, so it truly is the standard version of Step 2. Bring us clarity is only found in the Tony A steps, which were never formally adopted by ACA World Service. However, they're fully embraced and used by the ACA Fellowship. And as I've already mentioned, they've influenced all of ACA's literature. What's important to remember is that the standard steps address the recovery of our adult selves, while the Tony A steps address the healing of our inner child. Recovery in ACA requires both. To understand the meaning of restored to sanity, it helps to understand how the AA program defined insanity, which was picking up the first drink. You see, the irrational decisions and crazy behavior caused by drinking can be blamed squarely on alcohol. A non-alcoholic would do the same insane things if they drank too much. Insanity, according to AA, was what an alcoholic did when they were 100% sober. To rationalize and justify the first drink, which would lead to yet another spree, as they called it, despite the mounting consequences and sincere desire to stop drinking. That is insanity, and it's what Step 2 addresses in AA. And since there was a time in every alcoholic's life when they were not obsessed with alcohol, being restored to sanity makes sense. And for every alcoholic, you'll have others who were affected. Spouses and family members often become as sick as the alcoholic due to their own obsession to fix and control the alcoholic. Recovery in Al-Anon also begins by admitting one is powerless over alcohol, namely the effect it has on the alcoholic. In other words, you cannot fix or control them. Since it was a time when the codependent person was not obsessed with fixing and controlling the alcoholic, being restored to sanity also has meaning within the context of the Al-Anon program. However, for many adult children who were born and raised in a dysfunctional home, restored to sanity has no meaning. This is what Tony A. meant when he said the standard AA steps are not only inappropriate for adult children, they drive them crazy. What adult children needed, according to Tony A., was clarity. You see, all of the traits, which are the effects of growing up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional home, are forms of distorted thinking. Normalizing dysfunction is distorted thinking. Believing your traits are simply who you are, as opposed to who you were conditioned to be, is distorted thinking. Believing you are defective or unlovable is distorted thinking. Fears from your inner child are forms of distorted thinking. Anger from your inner teen is a form of distorted thinking. Anything at all from your inner critic is distorted thinking. And the antidote for distorted thinking is clarity, which we may have never had until working the ACA program, which is why the Tony A version says, "We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could bring us clarity." And make no mistake, a power greater than ourselves is absolutely necessary. That's because distorted thinking runs deep in our unconscious mind. And below that lie the unconscious beliefs that we are unloved and unlovable. Also, it's important to realize that our distorted thinking is what created the defense mechanisms that protected our inner child. They must be carefully dismantled. Recovery is a process. Higher power will allow clarity in small doses, over time, not too fast, and certainly not all at once. The good thing is, you don't have to worry about any of this because higher power is controlling the process. The only question is, do you believe it? Step 2 is not about whether or not higher power is helping you. It's only about your belief, which is in itself an important part of the recovery process. And on a final note, we've looked at the differences between sanity and clarity, but there's common ground as well. You see, one of the definitions of sanity is to see things clearly. In other words, with clarity. In that sense, the two versions have similar meaning. You could say, clarity opens the door to sanity. And that wraps up this video, which is meant to be food for thought. If you got something out of it, please click like and subscribe and forward to a fellow traveler. I'm Robbie Bobby. Thank you for listening. And as always, keep coming back.